It is going to be so fun for me today to interview a big-time townie. I mean, you must have a couple thousand posts, and yeah, you do. You have 2,176 posts as of an hour ago. I mean, that's it's an amazing. I mean, you are one hell of a guy. You're a Canadian. I'm down here in Phoenix. You're up in Edmonton, Canada, which is straight north of Denver. I have to tell our viewers that in Phoenix, about every couple of years, there'll be an article in the paper that about 10% of the homes are in any given year are sold to Canadians. So I actually, my two orthodontists that I refer to, they're Canadians. I mean, so I feel like I actually live in Canada because almost everybody I know down in my neighborhood is a Canadian. But I want to start in a totally different place. You've been doing dentistry for a couple decades. And before we start, I know you're a legend in dental implants, and we've gone from the golden age of dentistry to the titanium age of dentistry, and implants are replacing 3 bridges, and I'm really excited. I really want to get into that. But before we get into all that, I want to start you first with 5,000 kids each year graduating dental school. And a lot of these kids are coming out and they're saying, they're telling me, oh, Howard, you're lucky. You graduated in 1987. I came out to this economic depression. 2008 was a hell of a recession. Wow. I mean, I came out and I went to freshman year in college was 1980. That was one of the worst recessions ever, 21% interest rates. You were probably in grammar school when that happened. Do you remember that one? How old were you in 1980?
1980, I probably would have been junior high school.
So do you remember that recession?
Yep. Oh, yes.
Yeah, because in Kansas, when the interest rates hit 21%, a lot of farmers couldn't make the interest payment on their debts. So I had a couple of friends whose dad went in the barn and blew their head off because they were losing the family farm that had been in existence for a century. And then I got to school in 87. That was the stock market crash, Black Monday. Then there was the March 2000, the internet bubble popped. But anyway, a lot of people wonder. And now there's corporate dentistry. There's Rick Workman of Heartland Dental has 1,000 dentists employed with 2,000 hygienists. Steve Thorne's got 500 offices. Does the future, after doing dentistry for 2 decades, does dentistry look bright and promising to you? If your own daughter was graduating dental school this year, would you say, good job, welcome to the team, this is going to be great? Or are you like, wow?
No, dentistry is a great place to be. And it's interesting because I think you're getting a bigger divide over time between the dentists who could survive in any economy and the dentists who are going to go with the flow, and if the flow is not good, it's not good for them. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I know. And that was well said. I like the way you said there's dentists who are going to go with any economy, and there's dentists who are ebbing and flowing with the masses.
I help with... I was out at the Vancouver Maxi course recently, and I was chatting with some dentists there, and somebody was crying the blues because he's in an overserviced area with 1 million dentists and some other guys who aren't even licensed working out of their garage and fighting the wars to cutthroat dentistry. But then I talked to him, and I said, there's places starving for dentists, a 2-hour drive from here. Why don't you go work there 3 days a week and build up your practice with them? Oh no, well, my wife's family's here and stuff. And my sympathy level dropped a little bit when I heard that. I'm sorry, but I don't know about you, but when I started out, I worked hard and built things up. It didn't just happen.
No, were you born and raised in Edmonton and then set up, down the street from the hospital you were born in, or did you go to where there was more a need demographically?
No, I set up. I was raised at least in Edmonton, and when I graduated, I was an associate in a mall practice learning how to do dentistry, because you sure don't learn it in dental school. And I cut my teeth, same as everyone else, working weird hours and seeing emergencies, and the same as most people do. And it's not a bad way to go, right? Anyone who sets that up right out of dental school, I can't figure out how you would do that.
Yeah. So how long? So what do you? I really like what you said. There's a dentist who can survive in any economy, and then there's a dentist ebbing and flowing. So what? When I think of you, I think of a high-end dentistry. I think of implantology. I mean, if I need an implant, I'd go to Canada to have you do it. Why? Where did you pull out and separate from the average Joe, Dick, and Harry and Jane and become. Am I describing you right? Would you say your practice is heavily focused on implantology?
That's all it is. I have full-time implants.
I mean, that's Carl Mish's, that's the International Congress Oral Implantology diploma in your background, isn't it? Right to the right of your head?
That's my ABOI, actually.
ABO?
Yeah, I got that on the other wall, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got those pieces of paper.
So how many years, I mean, obviously, you did you place an implant in dental school?
No.
Yeah. So when did you get into this?
Heresy back then, right?
Yeah.
So my story, Reader's Digest version anyway, is I did general dentistry for umpteen years, and about 10 years out of school, maybe not that, 7, 8, 9 years out of school, I went and took the Place Your First Implant course just to learn to do it on my own patients, keep my brain from turning to mush. And I enjoyed it. And when I got back to town here, I found I had the odd person asking me for help with cases, because at that point, at least, there was a lot of the specialists were maybe charging generous fees sometimes, and sometimes the results weren't ideal, and sometimes people were having trouble getting in to see them, and et cetera, et cetera. So I wound up doing the odd case to help my friends, and then it kind of grew and grew from there. Organically, I wound up taking more courses, doing more cases. Eventually, it built and built, and I had to print referral pads. Eventually, one day, I woke up and said, you know what, I have 2 full-time jobs here. I have my high-end general practice, and I have my implant practice. And if I'm going to see my kids grow up, I got to choose one. So then I set out about finding an associate to partner to take over my general practice, because I didn't want to kick these people to the curb, right? It built up. They're still all my friends. I still see them around the office here. So I brought in another guy. He took over my general practice. I went to full-time implants.
What year was that?
I was just thinking that it's got to be 7, 8 years now. And
so 2007?
7 or 8 years I've been doing it full-time to exclusion. And now he's seeing the overflow from my practice. So he's up 70, 80% implants now too. So he's going to probably follow the same cycle, or he has to give his general practice away at some point too.
Now, do you consider yourself an implantologist?
Yeah, if you want to call it that. I mean,
sorry to be ignorant, but you are in a different country. Does Canada follow the same 9 specialties as recognized by the American Dental Association?
Absolutely. It's the same deal where implant dentistry is not a recognized specialty in Canada. I'm a general dentist whose practice is limited by choice to implant, placement, restoration, grafting.
And I want to say one thing about that. Being 52, being out there 27 years, there's a lot of specialists where the dentist referring to them doesn't realize they never went to endo school. They can't say I'm an endodontist, but they can say practice limited to endodontics. And I got to tell you, I've got about 5 over the years that were in a small town of about 8 general dentists, and they just loved the endo, and they didn't really like the restorative. And one day they just had told all their friends, I'm only doing endo. And their friends said, really? And now huge practice. And a couple of the biggest legends in endodontics never went to endo school. One was who's John McSpadden in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And the other one was the inventor of Thermophil in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I know you.
Yeah. What's his? He's the richest endodontist in the world. He owns Thermophil, that's owned by Dentsply, and he just same thing. So, is that what you're doing? Are you kind of implantology will obviously be a specialty, like dental anesthesia will obviously someday. So, are you just saying practice limited to endodontics?
Yeah.
Practice limited to implantology.
Yeah, so that's what I am. My practice is limited to implant dentistry. So,
and are you getting referrals from other general dentists in Canada, or does that not?
My practice is all by referral.
All by referral.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just amazing. I don't think there's anybody like that in Phoenix, Arizona.
I'm not familiar with anyone, but you know what? I think if we're going to drag implant dentistry forward, sometimes drag it, I think we need maybe more people who do implant dentistry to exclusion. There's people who do the odd implant. There's oral surgeons who do some implants, periodontists, prosthodontists, and even the odd endodontists. But I think there's benefit in having the more people where the buck stops here, and the crazy cases where it's got 3 different of everything and it's been attempted, that's 15% of my practice is complications and revisions. And that means it's already been tried somewhere else. So it's not glamorous, but I think we need more people doing that.
Well, for me, the litmus test is it patient-centered or is it doctor-centered? And in every profession you look at, whether it's policeman, fireman, dentist, they always think about themselves before the end user, the customer. And if I was a customer and I had 4 or 5 different implants and bridges and complications and they were shipping me to all these different people, I have the right for one guy that can do it from A to Z. And if I find out this guy's the best, he should be able to do it all, and I could go there and pay money and have it all done. So that's my litmus test. So implantology and dental anesthesia has to be a specialty.
I think the dental anesthesia people have a better argument than we do, actually. When you look at the things that the ADA says, the requirements that they have to create a specialty, we cover most of them. The one thing that we get into trouble with in dental, and as a sidebar, the specialization, the S word. I mean, if implantology becomes a specialty tomorrow, it doesn't affect me either way. I don't benefit or hurt from it either way. I don't have an ego or I care if they call me a specialist or not. But I think that there's probably benefits overall, and some drawbacks, but overall a benefit to making things like dental implantology and dental anesthesiology a specialty. If you're a patient and you've got a disaster, you don't really know where to go.
Right.
And what's even more common is the new guy who just graduated from dental school. He's a new grad, he's out there, something crosses his desk, it's a real mess. He doesn't know where to refer the patient. He's sending them to the guy he met as an instructor in dental school. That's because that's all you know. That's all we know when we graduate, right? So they don't know where to send things like this. So,
and come on, they gave a specialty to pediatric dentistry. What is that? Just a small human? I mean, should I go to a specialist for a short, fat, bald human? If they get pedo, if there should be pediatric dentists, there should be short, fat, bald dentist specialist where I can go in there and have a beer and a cheeseburger.
That's the point I was getting at, is the thing that we don't do or aren't good at arguing, at least maybe in implant dentistry, is that there are unique things in our world that don't overlap. Like, it's not like half our world is covered by the surgeons and half our world is covered by the prosthodontists. There's other things out there that they don't seem to necessarily realize that we have as a unique skill set. So
okay, I want to get into some specifics. I want to ask you, first of all, is this true? When I got out of school in '87, the first thing I did is I signed up for Carl Misch's 7 3-day weekend in Pittsburgh and got my fellowship in the Mission Institute. And then I got my diplomat in the International Congress for Implantology, and I thought implantology was very hard. I mean, you'd have a 2-dimensional pano, you thought you had 1.5 inches of bone, you'd lay a flap, and it was just this paper ridge, and by the time you smooth it down, you lost half your bone. Do you agree that with 3D radiographs and surgical guides, that it takes less skill to place an implant today than it did 25 years ago? Due to technology?
I do not agree with that. Let me explain why. First of all, my students, I teach the old place your first implant, continuum course kind of thing. I maintain to them strongly that if you need a CT to place the case, you shouldn't be doing that as one of your first 10 cases. Okay? Because what I see happen is that people get themselves in trouble with guides. And I've been doing guided surgery since 1999 or something like that. I do it from time to time.
What percent of yours do you use guides today?
On my cases, probably 50% of my full arch cases, and probably about 2% of my smaller cases, 2 or 3 implants.
So a single tooth replacement, you pretty much don't use one.
Only in really specific circumstances.
But in full arch half the time.
Yeah, I would say.
Oh, okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt. Continue.
But the problem is that people get mixed up in guides before they know how to do implant dentistry, right? Sort of the term you hear, freehand surgery, somebody's called skilled surgery, trying to make it sound better than guided. It's not. But what I'm seeing is people get themselves in trouble because they get this guide made up. They don't realize the limitations of guides. They go to put the guide in, it doesn't fit, or worse yet, it almost fits and they don't know it's not fitting properly, and they get themselves in big trouble with them. And I like to see people learn to do surgery without guides before they get into the guided game and use those to attack more complicated cases. And actually, I was having this discussion with someone the other day.
No, I don't want to throw you under a bridge, but what would you say to the 25-year-old kid in dental school right now that says, he's just old school?
Well, more power to him, right? But I have an open door policy. People come and watch me every day. So when I have somebody like that, I say, you know what? Come down and hang out for half a day. You got a half a day, come down and hang out. And I don't think any of those kids have ever walked out of here and not said, wow, I need to be able to do it this first.
Okay, then what would you say to the second argument, saying, hey, doc, if you lay a flap and you reflect all that back, you're letting in saliva that has all these microorganisms, where if I do a surgical guide with a tissue punch, it's a lot more hygienic, less clean, less trauma, less swelling afterwards. Do you agree with that?
I don't lay a flap automatically unless I need one.
So
and you brought up a good point. There's a lot of cases where you need a flap to maintain keratinized gingiva. People are slapping in a guide, closing their eyes, and burn right through it, right? So that's another one of many, many problems, one of the many dirty secrets we see with guides.
Can you explain that in better detail? Because I think that might have gone over the head of a lot of people in dental school.
Well,
that basically a lot of people are going through a surgical guide and they're basically going through all the attached gingiva, and they don't realize that this thing is placed and they've just lost all attached gingiva, where if there would have been a flap that pushed to the side, that would have been a better deal. But can you explain, can you go that in more detail?
So somebody like me I do quite a few implants, somebody who's got some experience, I probably, if I'm placing a simple case with one or two implants, if I'm laying a flap 4 to 5 times, it's not because I need to see the ridge, it's because I don't have enough keratinized gingiva. I want a decent band of it on the buccal of the eventual crown. If you take a tissue punch, whether it's with your eyeballs or through the guide, or just drill right through that guide, and you go through the junction of where the keratinized tissue and the mucosa is, you're going to have mucosa instead of attached gingiva around the outside of your eventual crown. That's hard to get back once it's gone. And while implants are less susceptible to having not enough kg than teeth are, you don't want that if you can avoid it. So when I do a flap, it's not this idea of I'm going to visualize a ridge. It's usually because of keratinized gingiva. You know, CT, I did this gig for a few years before I had CT, and nobody died, okay? But CT is a tremendous tool. What it's doing for us is it means that I know what I've got before I get in there. That's the big thing. It doesn't make more bone. You can't, the salesman's running around saying you can do more cases because you can find bone to put the implants in. Baloney, right? If that means you're putting it in the wrong spot sometimes. But what it does mean is that there's less surprises. So you maybe don't have to necessarily be as invasive. You can find out before you get in there, you've got everything lined up. That's the win. And when you ask about guides, you talk about guides, what I think may change, this is just my crystal ball prognostication, but I think what you're going to see more of is as CT technology gets better and cheaper and less less radiation involved, I think you'll see more people doing cases where instead of doing a guide, they're going to drill a hole, stick in a guide pin, and then you're going to see more people taking a low resolution CT of that instead of a PA, so they can see in 3 dimensions where they're at. That, I think, is what one of the changes you're going to see. Now that brings up some more things, because some people like to sedate all their patients and you can't sit them up and march them down the hall to the CT machine, but I think you'll see more of that instead.
Okay, I think one of the biggest complaints that they get on these podcasts, a lot of this stuff is flying over a lot of people's heads. So you're throwing around CBCT. So we've gone from 2-dimensional x-rays to 3-dimensional x-rays. Explain why you like the CBCT, or I prefer 3D x-ray. I think that's a better term. But and then a lot of dentists want specifics. You know, they want to know, like, well, don't just say CBCT. What did you get and why did you get it? You know, my whole mission is that with Dentaltown, no dentist has to practice solo again. So I'm an individual dentist. I want to get into this 3D radio. What CBCT did you buy, and what was going through your brain that picked your machine?
Okay, well, I'm going to preface that by one comment. When you say you like 3D better, we looked back last year and the year before, and the number was the same. Of our consults coming through the door, 4 a day or whatever it is, I did about 35% of them I took a CT on. Some days every patient gets a CT, but many of them don't. So I don't do a CT on every case. And I know some dentists do, and that's fine. If they want to do that, I don't have a problem with that. But in our world, I don't think that's necessary, and sometimes a PA is better than a CT. So keep that in mind. We bought an iCat I think I had the first next generation iCat off the assembly line, as opposed to the iCat Classic. The new one is the what do they call it? The iCat. It's got an X in it. They've got more low resolution settings on it. I like the iCat images, but one thing that told me when I bought it that I didn't kind of understand until I actually had it was he said it's not the machine. The software is more important than the machine. He couldn't have been more correct. So if you go buy a machine and it comes with software that makes your life, hell, then it doesn't matter how good the machine is. So before you spend cent one, get the software and play with it. And if they won't give you a free copy of the software to play with, run away, because that's a bad sign. Okay.
Yeah.
I like the tech support on it is dodgy, but I hear that complaint about everyone's machine. I only have one machine to compare to. Everyone who has different machines than me says the same thing. Oh, tech support, the guy knows less than I do.
So you run in some implantology circles. You probably know lots of implantologists. Does iCat seem to be the market leader in the implantology group, or is that not fair?
I don't know that that's fair. I think there's so many players now. I mean, I'm seeing guys use everything. There's pros and cons. For example, one of the drawbacks of the iCat is if you have the built-in pan with it, you're taking it on the same flat sensor, so that you don't have a curved sensor, and then the computer has to fix the pan. So some of the machines have two sensors, so there's advantage there, right?
Tell me what you think of this statement. You've been out of school 5 years. This machine's six figures. Do I really need to spend $100,000 on a 3D X-ray machine, or do you think coming soon to Edmonton there'll be a CD center that I can go get the X-ray? Or what if a local kid called you up and said, "Can I send a patient over and pay you some money for a CBCT?" I mean, because this is a tough decision to buy or not to buy a $100,000 CBCT. They got the same dilemma with a CAD/CAM CERAC. Same dilemma with the laser. So address the question, can I be a quality dentist without a $100,000 3D X-ray machine?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I tired in the odd case to do a scan on for them. No problem, right? And most major cities, including ours, have commercial scanning centers associated with the radiologists. But I get really tired of the thing where it's the standard of care. I hate that's thrown out. It's the standard of care. If you're not doing a CT of your patient beforehand, you're going to go down the river. The lawyers are going to be chewing on your heels. That's baloney. That's not true. I'd be the first one to stand up and defend someone who got in trouble doing or got told off for doing that. There's no reason that anybody. And like I said before, if the case is complicated enough that you think it needs a CT and you just do the odd case in your office, maybe that's not a case you should do. Maybe you should farm it out.
Okay, so you're saying I can be a high-tech dentist without spending six figures on a machine, on a CBCT. Let's go next. What's considered an easy starter case? Name me a couple of scenarios. If some dentist had a goal that said, okay, we're coming up on the end of the year. It's next year, 2015. I'm going to place 10 implants my first year. What would you be looking for? I mean, is this person, should he be thinking under a lower denture, 2 or 4? Is this replacing? Talk about starter cases, and more importantly, keep them out of trouble, keep them out of jail, keep them out of the lawsuit. Which cases are for advanced? What's beginning? What's advanced?
Yeah, what I tell the students is you're looking for the single canal endo of implant cases. You look at your schedule and you see there's a single canal endo and you go, oh, thank goodness, that's my recovery time. I mean, you're looking for the same thing, the slam dunk cases. And that means several things. Number one, stay out of the aesthetic zone when you're learning. For heaven's sake, don't stay out of the maxillary anterior when you're learning. I always am frustrated when you teach someone, and you teach them all these things, and then later you see a case on the lab bench where we have the implant lab too. They're bailing someone out with some outrageous thing that they got themselves in trouble. So stay out of the aesthetic zone,
especially on women.
Sorry.
Especially women, high needs aesthetic women.
Yeah.
I mean, if you did on an old guy like me, you're probably not going to be in trouble. But yeah, you get some high needs woman with aesthetics. That's
It's hard in many ways, so stay out of there. The easy slam dunk case is like an upper bicuspid with lots of bone, at least 10 millimeters of height, lots of width. It's not in the aesthetic zone. Those are the single canal endo of implant cases. So when people are taking their training course with us, I steer them towards those kind of cases. A lower case where you're away from the mental form. But you mentioned 2-implant lower cases. Those can be very challenging. The bone is not necessarily straight up and down there. Sometimes it's like this or this, and you can really have an adventure with those if you're not comfortable with them, and make it really difficult to restore.
So if we look at statistics, we've got 31 million Americans with 0 teeth. And you're saying that that's not really the low-hanging fruit. But when we look at missing teeth, it's the 6-year molars are the most likely to be missing in American data. Any low-hanging fruit in the 6-year molars?
Absolutely. Those are relatively straightforward cases for most people. In some cases, the bone can be a little bit dodgy on the lower and on the lingual where it drops in a bit. But if you have a finger, you don't need a CT scan. If you can stick your finger in it and feel if the bone goes down beside the lingual of the first molar or it takes off inside and you've got a more difficult case. Use your digital CT scan right here and you can tell if it's a challenging case.
Would you prefer an upper or a lower on a 6-year molar for entry level? Or is it really no difference to you?
It's not a big difference for me, I don't think.
And then with the tooth on each side of it, that's your orientation. You wouldn't recommend... If someone was doing their first 6-year molar replacement, single unit, would you recommend a surgical guide or not?
Well, I make the students do a surgical guide just as an exercise. But I'm not talking about a guided, CT-guided surgery. There's a lot more surgical guides out there than just a CT-guided, place the implant in the computer thing. You know what? You're going to need a model of these cases anyway, because at some point you're going to restore it. So if these guys take an upper and lower alginate, pour a model up, they can see where they want to be. They can make a hole where they want the entry point to be. They can do a vacuum form on it. They've already solved half their problems, well, a third of their problems. The implant positioning is going to be based on the entry point, the angulation, and the depth. And if you can get your entry point under control, your life just got 1/3 easier, right? So there's a lot of ways to make your life easy with a little bit of preparation. It doesn't involve a 6-figure CT machine.
When we're talking about surgical guide, there's on Dentaltown, I'd say the two most, you're all over Dentaltown, but there's a big thread on Blue Bio Horizon, and then another one with
BlueSky Bio.
BlueSky Bio.
BlueSky Bio.
And then there's another big thread with Armin. Armin has got in America in like 3 cities in Southern Cal. Can you talk about those two, or give any insight on those two?
I don't have a ton of experience. BlueSky Bio is an implant knockoff company owned by a couple of good guys who post on Dentaltown as well. I use their products from time to time. Good guys, good products. They've gone ahead and they've got themselves a software. It's actually a pretty good one. And the key for them is they've said, okay, this is freeware. You can all you have to do is register and download it. And so a lot of people and a lot of labs have downloaded the software because free is everyone's favorite price, right? And they've been working with it and using it to create guides. You can, even if you're not going to use a guide, if you want to play around with this, if you want to play around with the software, it's nice to have a free one to play with and learn with. Okay. Now, Armin Mirzaran, he owns or however you say his name, he owns a group of scanning centers, and he uses a Sirona system called CCAT to create guides as well. That's another service. There's lots of services out there that will make you a guide. I mean, if you really feel it, you want a guide, and you don't want to refer it out, or you can't refer it out because you're in a small town, the patient can't travel, blah, blah, blah. You do have options where if you can somehow get them a CT, you can send it out, and someone will crank out a guide for you and send it to you.
Well, what I'm hearing from you is that how many, I mean, you place thousands of implants.
Yes.
That the 6-figure CBCT 3D X-ray machine and the surgical guide are not magic pills. They're going to take away the fact that this is just good old-fashioned common sense surgery.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better. They're a tremendous tool, a tremendous tool to have up our sleeve, but you can get yourself in trouble if you view it as the be all and end all, not one more tool. I mean, there are cases where I'll put in a guide, I'll do the case, and I'll take out the guide and look and make sure I know where I am.
And another thing I want to talk about is I'm always afraid that dentists treat dentistry too much as engineering, physics, when I see my problems every day as a biology problem. I mean, I feel like, like dentists will always talk about how good the margin of their crown fits, or they'll complain about someone else's work because the margin is maybe open. And I'm like, dude, Streptococcus mutans wiped out that tooth when it was a virgin tooth. I mean, when I see termites going to a barn, I don't see them attacking at the barn hinge door and saying, that barn door was not very good, let's go. I mean, they just walk up to the wall and just start eating. I'm very excited that titanium can't be eaten by Streptococcus mutans, but I want to pick your brain about, a lot of people say they see, there's periodontal disease around this implant. I see what do you call it? PeriImplantitis. But that's very different than periodontal disease around tooth. I mean, to me,
it is and it isn't. The bugs are pretty much the same. We're pretty clear on the fact that the bugs in PeriImplantitis are very similar to what we see in periodontitis. And maybe there's some more spirochetes spinning and talking, but whatever. But we're learning a few things over time, because remember, even though implants have been around for 40, 50 years, they've only been heavily used in the last maybe 15 years. So we're starting to see follow-up on enough people that you can start to make more, I think, assessments, not just, somebody's research paper, but people getting an empirical idea of what's going on with their own cases and anecdotal evidence and comparing it to what their friends see. We're learning a few things. We know that people who have lost their teeth to perio disease have active perio disease have a higher rate of periimplantitis afterwards. That would make perfect sense. You've got the same bugs hanging around the mouth. We know that some implant designs are more prone to suffering from periodontal disease, and we also know that, and I'm pretty convinced that a lot of these things are multifactorial. And by that I mean that, if the patient's got a heavy bite and they don't have a lot of teeth left, and they've got a history of gum disease, and maybe it's not the biggest implant, or there's a bone stin, and any one of those things probably would have been okay, but you start adding them all together and the implant didn't have a prayer, right? So I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, it makes totally sense. So obviously an implant can't get a cavity. I mean, it's immune to Streptococcus mutans. When I go into the nursing homes, Phoenix, Arizona is the desert. So it's about, we call them snowbirds. People just come down here for the winter. A lot of people come down here to retire. A lot of them from Canada, like say 10% from Canada, just because they don't want to weather the cold when they're 80 years old. And when I go into the nursing homes, it's pretty obvious, Bill, that it's all women. So guys like us, we don't live long enough to get to the nursing home. It really is almost all women. I mean, you can go down an entire wing and not see a single guy. But number two, they're just wiped out by root surface decay within a year and a half. And so many of my patients I treated in the last 27 years, I did a root canal buildup and crown on this tooth, and it was just like mush after a year and a half. And I did an implant and a crown over here, and it's just sterling. It's just shiny. And sometimes, I can rattle off 5 names in my head where the only thing left in their mouth was the implant crowns. And I look at some of these ladies that had all these root canals and crown and bridge, and they didn't last 18 months. And some of these other ladies that had 4 implant or 6 implants and a 12-unit bridge, or 4 implants and overdenture, they're like the luckiest lady in the nursing home. Are you seeing root surface decay wiping the elderly out in nursing homes?
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing as you, of course. So if you're going to lose all your teeth, right, you're going to lose them for one of a couple of reasons. You're going to lose them because you have rampant decay, or you got rampant periodontal disease, or you have tremendous amount of wear. Now, implants don't do well with patients who have tremendous amount of wear. If you ground your teeth down to nothing, your implants don't like that kind of force, right? If you lost your teeth to gum disease, you're a little bit better off, but you still have an increased chance compared to the average person of having problems around your implants. But the patients that we love are the patients who lost their teeth to root caries, because the implant's never going to need a cap filling, it's never going to need an endo. Those patients I feel great about. The interesting thing, though, is that some of these patients, when they get into those environments, oral hygiene is not great. It's interesting to see some of these patients because they'll have implant, snaps or whatever, just caked with calculus, and yet they have no problems around them. Just like you see some people with teeth, they have all kinds of calculus around them and no gum loss, no periodontal inflammation. And other people, a little bit of anything, and it's the end of the world. And so maybe, I don't have anything to back this up, but maybe we need to take a closer look at people when we're taking their teeth out and say, these teeth that were taken out because they have root caries, there's calculus there, but there's no inflammation. The bone is rock solid. It's the worst extraction case of your day, right? So maybe those people are better implant candidates because when things get worse, looking paternalistically into the future, when things get worse for their oral hygiene, they're going to stand up better with implants. I don't know.
And I also think when that case selection, in my mind, I am so jaded on boy versus girl because the average American boy lives to be 74 and the average American girl is 79. So they're outliving us 5 years, and like I say, when I go to those nursing homes, they can't brush their teeth with rheumatism. A lot of them have dementia. Some of them have Alzheimer's. But what's really the saddest part is it's usually one little girl nurse assistant for $11 an hour treating 22 people on a wing. So if you really think they're going to go brush and floss and rinse and give them a bath and dress them and get them to dinner, it's not going to happen. The brushing bill, it's like a 2-minute exercise. It's like ding, ding, spit in a cup, done. I mean,
you're lucky if they have their own denture in their mouth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you said the lowest hanging fruit, the very lowest apple hanging from the tree was an upper bi. What would be the next apple up the upper bicuspids? You said not in the aesthetic bone. Good. What would be the second apple up the tree?
I think you're talking about a first molar, then like you say, upper or lower. One of the interesting things, I'm going to tell you this. One of the interesting things with teaching this course is this, and it happens year after year after year, this exact same thing. People sign up for our course and they say, you know what? I'm signed up for your course, but I'm really worried if I'm going to be able to find a case. I don't know if I can find a case to bring in because they bring in their first case and they do it here with us holding their hand, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know if I'll be able to find a case here that. And the exact same thing with everyone, every single time. So they go through the first stage of the course where we talk about treatment planning and stuff, and then they always come back and they go, well, I've got these 4 or 5 cases and I don't know which one to choose. Every time, it's uncanny. And what that tells me is that, and these aren't dentists who go with the flow, like I said before. These are sharp people. But it tells me that an awful lot of general dentists have a ton of undiagnosed and untreated edentulous spaces in their practice. These people are bringing in the low-hanging cases after case of them that been in their recall practice for 10 years.
Specifically, what are you talking about? Are you talking about you're putting on a course in implantology?
Yeah, so when I tell the students you have to bring in your patient.
So you're talking about this is something you do with your dental school?
We actually have a teaching center here in the same building, but yeah.
But I mean, if I'm a podcast viewer out here and I'm out in the middle of Shawnee, Oklahoma, can I go to your office and take this course? I mean,
you could, but I would steer you away from that, and this is why. I think there's great benefit in trying to learn locally. There's a lot of different ways you can learn to do implants, right? You can go do a 2-year residency someplace. You can go take one of these continuums where it's, a weekend, month for a year or whatever. You can go do, I would hesitate to steer you towards the 1 weekend hotel course. I think there's risks involved with that. But what we do here is we offer the very entry-level, low-hanging fruit course, like you say. And I think there's courses exist in a lot of places, but one of the benefits that people don't think about is that after they've done the course, who do they have to support them locally? Because we have people come take my course that have already taken a course somewhere else. They've flown across the continent because if it's far away, it must be much better. We all know how that works. And then they come back and they go, I don't even know where to order saline. I'm at a loss. And so if you can find something locally where you've got some support, if something goes sideways, they can pull you out of the fire. They can help your staff. Your staff can come hang around and learn. There's great benefit in that. So I would tell people to try to find something in their neighborhood first.
And the proof of that is Dentaltown is coming up on 190,000 members. And I've been saying all along that all these dentists are alone and solo and shy. And like you want to learn endo. Every endodontist in your town is a shy, introvert, engineer, scientist, geek. And if you just called them and said, hey buddy, can I come over and watch you all day? He's like, oh my God, a friend. Oh yeah. Periodontists, these people fly across the country to set up a perio program in their office when they got a periodontist 3 miles from their office who would love to meet you, but he's too shy and whatever. And oh my God, the street smart dentist can sit there and call their periodontist say, will you come down and teach our hygienist how to do a perio program? Absolutely. And can I watch you place the implant? Everyone's dying for a friend, and dentists are just shy, introvert people. And so they would rather pay thousands of dollars and fly across country, because if I give you $5,000, I have permission to walk in there and be your friend and blah, blah, blah. And the guy next door, the street smart people do it next door. The other street smart people are listening to podcasts like this or on Dentaltown taking a course. By the way, when I told everybody I was interviewing you today, must have told about a dozen different townies. They're all like, when is he going to put up an online CE course on Dentaltown? A lot of people want you to put a curriculum up.
In my free time. Yeah, right.
In your free time? But think about that, because that was the main feedback everybody told me. They're like, but I said, well, at least we're getting him a podcast. So, back to surgical guides. We talked about different systems. You said that for a big case, half the time use it. A single tooth implant, almost never use it. Give me specifics. How would you do your surgical guide for, let's say, 4 on the floor? We're hearing that a lot in the media. They're advertising it all over TV. Come to my office, 4 on the floor. Isn't that a noble Biocare product?
An old school term refers to 4 actually straight up and down implants in this mandibular symphysis, which we still do, but that's the old 4 on the floor you'll hear about. You're talking about all on 4.
All on 4.
All on 4 is the Nobel, registered trademark name for where we're doing 4 implants and the back ones are angled. Okay, typically just the back ones, but sometimes all 4. I do that from time to time. On the upper I prefer 6, but yeah, we angle the back ones sometimes to avoid the sinus if I don't want to graft it or whatever. It's a great tool to have in our toolbox. One of the problems with all on 4, dentistry is bad for dentists for loving one treatment and then trying to squeeze all their patients into that treatment. People do tremendous surgical gymnastics to try to make the patient fit their favorite treatment instead of the other way around and having a number of treatments at their disposal. And I actually even see cases where patients come in with the angled implants and there was no reason to angle the back ones. And like, So anyway, you're going back to your question. You're asking, what would I do what are the mechanics of me to crank out an all-on-4 case? Let's say the patient is a dentulous. They've had a denture for a while, so it's things are healed. They don't want their denture anymore for whatever reason. They can't function with it. And then you want to do a guided case. So what I'll do is, typically in those cases, I'll recognize them right at the consult. So when I'm doing the consult and I say, okay, we need a scan on this case, I'll actually nip downstairs to my lab with their denture. I've got an old Obtura gun from endo filling, and I'll put a number of blobs of gutta percha on their denture, and then we bring their denture upstairs, we scan their denture separately, and then when the patient has their scan done, for diagnostic purposes, they're wearing this denture. Then you can flick all these pieces of gutta percha off. Now I don't have to subject them to more radiation and rescan them if I decide I want to go ahead and do this as a full arch guided case, because it's already have all the information I need. So what will happen is because I'm too busy and lazy to design it myself most of the time, unless it's something else, I'll upload it to one of these centers, whoever I'm using that month. I will upload the case, all the scan of the patient and the denture with the markers in it to the case. They'll have somebody, or typically a retired dentist or somebody who designs the case. They'll phone me up. I have a go-to meeting with them to confirm the placement. Takes 5-10 minutes. Then they crank out the guide. It shows up. Hopefully it doesn't get caught in customs, which is an adventure when you're in Canada. I've done cases freehand because I gave up waiting for the guide that was stuck in customs for weeks. But when the guide comes back, and away you go. So that's not a complicated way to crank these out without me getting involved in too much stuff. Now I've got 5, 6, 7 different softwares, but they're not cheap, some of them too, so people can avoid that as well.
Okay, give them, so they don't practice solo again, give them, 1 or 2 names of a software and 1 or 2 names of a lab.
Okay, so let's say you want to do your first ever guided case. You could go to somebody like 3DDX in Boston, let's say.
www.3ddx.com.
And they've got some information there on how to do it. There's a lab in the States called Rowe Dental Labs that does some. I've had some cases with them. The last one they sent me, they had the wrong size guide pins in the front, so I was a little bit disappointed. But all of these cases, you have to know what you're getting a little bit, because these guys that are doing this are working with a whole bunch of different systems, and sometimes there's issues like that. The other thing that people don't realize with guided surgery is you're going to need a specific surgical kit. You can't just take, in most cases, you can't just take your surgical kit and just run it through a guide. The drills are too short. So it's more than just getting this piece of plastic if you're going to do fully guided surgery.
Shed some light on this. We know the largest dental company in the world is Danaher out of Washington, D.C. They own lots of dental companies. One of the companies they own is Kerr, which bought Jerry Risnick's business, Implants Direct. And last week, they paid $2 billion for Noble Biocare. Yet the dentists a lot of dentists say, titanium's titanium. If they sold this titanium implant at the store, at any store, titanium is titanium. So if every implant's the same, if titanium's titanium, and Danaher already owns Implants Direct, which is a nice titanium implant, why would Danaher, obviously, you can't get that big without knowing something a lot more than me. Why would they write a check for $2 billion for Noble Biocare? Basically what I'm saying is a titanium implant with a Nike logo, Noble Biocare, is that better than an implant you've already got that just is Implants Direct, and the Noble Biocare is it's associated with the legend implantologist Mr. Brandmark, who's now retired in Brazil, and he's from Sweden, where they had the Nobel Peace Prize, and he called it Nobel Biocare, and did they just buy a Nike logo? Or they already had a $99 implant. Why did they pay $2 billion for Mr. Brandmark's Noble Biocare?
Well, I don't know if it's worth $2 billion or not. That's their call. It's their money. We're seeing a lot of changes in the implant industry right now, where implant companies are becoming these big vertical organizations where they offer full service implants, and they also have, under their same company, they also have an economy version. So you're seeing things like Nobel Biocare is mixed up in that group, and they also own Aiden, which is an economy implant. You're seeing Straumann is the company that runs around saying, if you use any knockoff parts, you'll be burning the flames of hell because but they also just happen to own a big chunk of Medentica, which is the knockoff company. And they also own Neodent, which is a Brazilian, I believe, company which makes economy implants. So they say it on one side of their mouth, but on their side they're buying more companies. I think, and this comes up on Dentaltown all the time, but I also see it even in the students that I teach. People think that they're buying a commodity, they're buying an implant. The implant costs, the machines poop them out more every day, right? They don't cost a lot to crank out the actual physical implant. So when you're paying a chunk of money for that implant, you're paying for the R&D goes into it. You're paying for the support. You're paying for the rep to come around and help you. Some people don't avail themselves of that, so I don't know what to tell them. But at least if you're buying something from a mainstream company, you have a pretty good idea what you're getting. Now, I use a number of knockoff products, but the key to that is you have to know what you're buying. And when you're a new guy, you've just started placing implants, you don't know what you're getting, and you're a lot safer if you stay with the mainstream company. Then maybe you want to add a few things to your arsenal over time. Give them
some names.
Okay, so I see people that are seduced by price. I see people that will take my course, and they've got all the stuff to go get set up with any of the major companies, and then I find out later they've bought. Who should I pick on? They bought the latest thing from, let's say Implant Direct, because they until recently didn't have rep coverage. And Implant Direct, you can buy implants for cheaper, but you can get yourself in trouble because you don't know the difference. So now, let's say the guy has a Nobel replaced kit, and he's bought Nobel knockoffs from Implant Direct to say they call it the replant. What they don't tell you is that everything has to be a little bit different to beat the patent, right? So there's a little bit of differences there. And the replant, for example, has a different threading around the implant. It's got a Zimmer thread, not a Nobel thread. So if you use the thread tap and create the threads in your osteotomy, and then you put the replant in that's a different thread, you mush all the bone and you lose some of your initial stability. Well, then if you don't have the feel to deal with that or recognize that that's going to happen, you can get yourself not into big trouble, but you can make misery for yourself. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with knockoff companies. I use them myself. I think they're a great benefit, and I love seeing competition. But I think you can get yourself into trouble when you get mixed up with them before you know what you're buying.
And also what you're saying is the good old-fashioned rep who sells a more expensive implant, and you're just starting out. At least you'd have a relationship. You'd have someone that could show up that day, who knows all the local, who knows everything. I mean,
a good rep is worth their weight in gold. Not all reps are good reps, sadly, and there's a lot of turnover in reps in dentistry, not just in implant dentistry. I heard a joke once from a guy who was a sales manager. He says, look at all the booths here at the trade show. When the music stops, everyone moves over one booth, right? Because there's so much turnover. But if you have a good rep and you're starting out, they can be a boon for you. They're going to make sure you've got everything set up before you get there. They're going to come in and hold your hand. And you should take advantage of that.
And I only got data for the U.S., but in the United States of America, the average Americans will only have their job for 3 years, and then they'll switch to another company. So yeah, there's a lot of turnover. I mean, basically the average American changes jobs every 3 years. And in Phoenix, every year, 10% of the homes flip. So every year in Phoenix, 10% of Phoenicians are gone and replaced by someone else. So you would not say titanium is titanium, an implant is an implant. You do like some of these designs. You do like some of these research. There are things you like, and you're just not buying an implant on price.
No, I mean, well, we're a unique situation because we stock and place 8 different systems here in our center. I think we have like $200,000 in inventory, something outrageous. It's ridiculous. But that does not make sense for most dentists, right? If you want to try to find one system, if you're a dentist, a general dentist placing implants, you want to try to find one system you can use in almost every situation and stick with it because it makes a lot more economic sense to keep your inventory down.
Well, Doc, give him that name. He hasn't placed one, and you've placed out. You place more implants than you have posts on Dentaltown. Give him a name brand or two. Where should that person start?
Who are the? I mean, look at the mainstream implant companies. That's where you start. You start with Nobel, Straumann, Astra, BioHorizons, Zimmer in the States more than here. Though, if you deal with one of those companies and they have a rep.
Oh, okay, name those 5 again slower, just because they did, and give each one of a sentence why. You said Nobel Biocare. Is it fair to say historically that was the first? I mean, that was Brandmark in Sweden. Nobel Biocare.
Okay, well, there's a little bit of a history lesson, I guess. Nobel originally was set up. Their model of business is that they wouldn't deal with general dentists. They would only deal with specialists, right? They don't know. And so they would only deal with general dentists. Now in the States, of course, developed Stereos, which is another company, and they kind of gravitated towards the general dentist. Now Nobel bought or merged, depending on how you look at it, with Stereos back in about 2000-ish, I think. 2001, somewhere in there maybe. And so there's actually specialists to this day who won't use Nobel because they're still peeved off that Nobel started selling to the general dentist because how dare they, right?
We have that same company in the States where most of your 10,000 orthodontists won't buy any orthodontic supplies from a company who will sell ortho supplies to any general dentist. So that's still a huge issue for suppliers in America.
Yeah,
okay. So Nobel Biocare is the old Brandmark merging with Stereos, and that's probably the biggest, oldest brand name in implantology.
Straumann claims they sell more implants than Nobel now. I believe it's probably true.
And that's right next door in Switzerland, right?
Yeah, well, Nobel was from Sweden, but they moved to Switzerland for tax reasons. Okay, Straumann is from Switzerland as well. I would stay away from their tissue level implants, but a bone level Straumann is a way to start. It's an expensive implant, but there's no surprises. Then you're looking at companies. Interestingly, you look at something like some of these companies. You look at their parentage too. You see the BioHorizons booth and the Camlog booth at the trade show, and they're scrapping out against each other, and Shine owns them both, right? You're like,
Now, BioHorizon, that was the company started by the infamous Carl Misch, correct?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
They make a number of implants. The mainstream one, I suppose, would be the tapered internal. It's got the same inside connection as a Zimmer. That's not a bad place to start.
And Shine owns BioHorizon, and what was the other one you said?
They own Camlog as well.
Yeah, and those are good systems too.
Camlog's a bit older. It's the original Trilo. That's actually Bush's old implant. You know what? One of the things, I know where you're going is, where should the new guy start? And you know what? One of the things that I think is a big driving force should be, if you're taking the local course that I talked about before, what are they teaching? Because what you've taken in your training is a good place to start, because that's something you're more familiar with. That's what your mentor is comfortable with and can help you and pull out of the fire and has all the extra parts in his back closet when you forget to order something at the 11th hour. And the local labs will be familiar with it, because a lot of this is very geographical too. You might go to a part of the country where everything is 3i, let's say. There's parts of states where it's 3i has all kinds of penetration. Maybe that's a good implant for you there, simply because the lab's used to it. Everyone has parts. That's what you've been trained on, and that's not a bad way to look at it as well.
So this is really interesting. So basically, what I've been hearing from a very seasoned implantologist, who, I mean, really, you're a legend on Dentaltown. I mean, you got a couple thousand posts. You've been doing this for a couple decades. You're pioneering a new area of implantology. That's not even a specialty yet. Probably won't be for another decade or so. But basically, what you're saying is, there's no magic bullet in a 3D X-ray versus a 2D. There's no magic bullet in one implant company versus the other. There's no magic bullet on a surgical guide. Just relax. It's good old-fashioned oral surgery. Start with the low-hanging fruit, where it's just replacing one upper bicuspid. The most common missing tooth in America is obviously a 6-year molar, because home care was so much worse at age 6 than at 12, obviously. And you never really did say if you would prefer to pick a maxillary versus a mandibular.
I don't think I have a big preference there.
And that basically this is just good old-fashioned oral surgery. So then I want to end, and you're giving great advice. You're saying instead of working on the name brand of the implant and the price, why don't you get a local relationship? And instead of flying to Dominican Republic or a weekend course or something, or coming up to visit you in Canada, why don't you find someone local? Why don't you find some local relationships? And why don't you use the, get in with some local people, so that when you're getting ready to do a case and you're missing something, the buddy up the street that got you into this system might have that part, might have that piece. When you get into trouble, you have a relationship.
I'll expand on that too for one point. People, when they take a course, they take our course and they place their implant, they go, what course should I take next? And I say, no courses. Go place a handful of easy implants. Cherry pick some easy cases. Plant the seed with your other recalls. You see a case come through now, plant the seed. Say, I'm doing more of these. We might have to talk about this next year. But cherry pick some easy cases and then go do another course. Because when you've already placed a handful of simple implants, then when you go take the course, especially for something like a cadaver course or whatever, now you get way more out of it, because you know what you're looking at. I see these cadaver courses, like, they're not getting them.
I've only got you for another minute and a half, and I want you to, we have a dilemma here where the people most likely to be missing their teeth are smokers. And then, so when I'm picking a low-hanging fruit, should I avoid smokers? Do you avoid smokers, or talk about smoking?
Reader's Digest version, I tell people that they have a higher rate of having complications and failures. Now, I'll be honest with you, the research on that is mixed. There's some that says no, but I believe, and I think there's enough research to back me up, that says you have an increased chance of problems if you smoke. So, and I counsel people to quit smoking, and it's surprising how many of them do.
But for this low-hanging fruit, these initial first case, for the guy who's getting started, is there any health history where you'd say run?
Well, yeah, and you should be learning that. If you're not learning that in your course, you need to reassess the course. But there's a few things, people are taking in certain kinds of injected drugs for cancer, and
I'm not talking.
Things like that.
I'm sorry, I'm not talking about an acute disease where but just the chronic stuff. I mean, would you do a smoker who takes insulin for diabetes and is obese?
These are all relative contraindications. They start adding up. But you know what you need to look at? You have to say, if I took out a wisdom tooth on this person, would they heal nicely? That's a good way to look at it, because people who do general dentistry, they get that. They say, oh man, if I take this wisdom tooth, this guy's going to be back in my office next week. I know a wound's going to open up. It's going to be a mess. I'm going to have to pack it with alpha gel. If they would heal decently from a wisdom tooth, there's a good chance that their implant's going to fly.
And that was very well said. That was a great takeaway. So that's my last question, even though I just went into overtime in 1 minute. I see tons of dentists who say, yeah, I love extractions. I love removing wisdom teeth, but I've never placed an implant. What's harder, Bill? Placing an implant or removing a wisdom tooth? Or is that the same skill set?
Well, if you're cherry picking your cases, the easy cases for implants are much easier than your typical impacted wisdom tooth. In fact, I'll go you one better. I think that a simple flapless implant cherry picked case is easier than a class 2 composite by far. Wow.
That's the quote I'm going to push this tape out with. Hey, thank you so much for an hour of time. I know you're the busiest man in Canada. It's been awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for your 2,000 posts on Dentaltown. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. Thank you for all that you do for dentistry and for Dentaltown.
Oh, thank you for asking me. It was a pleasure. I was honored.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Take care.